Imagine being pulled over for no reason at all. A simple mistake. Or was it? The officer's eyes stay cold as he asks you to step out of the car, his words laced with unspoken judgment. You're no stranger to this feeling, but today something feels different. His grip tightens as he pulls you toward the car, and then it hits. This isn't just a routine stop. It's a test. A test of your patience, your dignity, and your will to fight back. But what happens when the system itself is against you? Will you make it out unbroken? Keep watching to find out. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. Jamari had always been the kind of person who kept his head down and focused on the future. At 17, he had big dreams of becoming a lawyer, something he decided after seeing his older brother's struggles with a justice system that always seemed stacked against him. Growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, Jamari had learned early to hustle. To navigate the small spaces where hope still flickered, he'd get up before the sun most days, walk the few miles to school, and work weekends at a local store. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the lights on at home and the dreams alive. Every morning, he would wave to Mrs. Johnson, the elderly neighbor who always had a kind word and a fresh batch of cookies waiting for him. Despite the harsh realities of his environment, Jamari had found a sense of community, a rhythm in the chaos that felt safe, but that morning felt different as he stood at the bus stop, his sneakers worn from the miles of pavement. A black SUV pulled up just beyond the corner. It was the kind of car you noticed in his neighborhood, the kind that didn't belong, the kind that usually didn't stop. Jamari had seen officers drive by, but something about this one made him pause. It was as if the air around him thickened, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He shrugged it off, pushing his earbuds back in and tuning out the world. But as he walked down the street toward his high school, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something that would make his routine, his safe space, feel like an illusion in the back of his mind. A small voice told him it wasn't the first time he'd felt this way. But the truth, Jamari didn't know how deep it would go. He didn't know that today, the world he'd built, the calm he'd fought for, would start to crack. It was only when he stepped onto the bus, greeted by the familiar faces of his classmates, that the unease started to settle. But even as the doors closed and the bus pulled away, Jamari could feel the tension in the air. It was like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, and he was about to find out that sometimes the world doesn't just hold its breath. It takes a deep, suffocating inhale, and then it exhales with a force that can knock you off your feet. The first sign of trouble came when Jamari got off the bus at the usual stop, his heart racing with an inexplicable feeling of dread hanging over him. It wasn't that something had happened, not yet, but it was the way the world felt different. As he made his way through the parking lot, his eyes locked onto a cop car parked close to the curb. Its lights weren't flashing, but the engine was running, and the officer behind the wheel was staring directly at him. Jamari slowed his pace, his steps hesitant. He had seen officers around here, but this felt different. He had learned to read the signs, the way they lingered in neighborhoods like his, never truly looking to help. Their presence was just another reminder that the system had a way of making people like him feel small. Unseen, he reached the sidewalk and kept walking, trying to shake off the feeling of eyes on him. He knew the routine. Stay calm, don't draw attention, keep your head down. He kept his gaze forward, walking with a purpose as he approached the school gates. But as he passed the officer's car, the officer suddenly pulled out, driving slowly behind him. Jamari's heart rate quickened. He didn't dare look back, but the car followed closely, its engine growling in the background. Jamari tried to ignore it, convincing himself that he was just being paranoid. But when the officer rolled down his window, Jamari's body tensed. "Hey!" the officer shouted. "You. Yeah, you? Come over here." A lump formed in Jamari's throat. His stomach dropped. "What did I do?" Jamari's voice was steady, but he could feel his hands starting to shake. He had never been pulled over, never had an officer stop him for no reason. He had heard the stories, but this This was real. This was happening to him. The officer leaned out of the car, his posture rigid. "You're walking suspiciously, boy. You don't belong around here." It hit Jamari like a punch in the gut. Boy, that word. He had heard it before, in his neighborhood, but always from people who saw him as less than. The officer's words rang in his ears, the weight of them settling in his chest. He felt the sudden sting of frustration, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "I'm just trying to get to school," Jamari said, keeping his voice as calm as possible. The officer's eyes narrowed. "You think I don't know what's going on here? I know you're kind." His eyes flicked up and down Jamari's body. "Go ahead and prove me wrong." Then Jamari felt the tension build, every muscle in his body screaming at him to just walk away, to ignore this and get to school like he was supposed to. But his feet wouldn't move. Instead, he found himself standing there, the anger building inside him, drowning out the fear. How dare he? "Nothing's wrong," Jamari repeated, his voice rising just a little. The officer stepped out of the car, walking toward him with an air of authority. The weight of his uniform and badge like a shield he used to make people feel small. "I don't think you're being truthful with me," the officer said, his voice colder now. "So? What are you really doing out here? Maybe you're trying to steal something. Or worse, maybe you're just causing trouble." Jamari's heart raced. He wanted to scream, to fight back. He had every right to, didn't he? Why was this happening? Why him? His mind raced with all the times he had heard about people just like him being targeted, judged by their skin, not their actions. He could feel it now, deep in his bones. It wasn't about him walking down the street. It wasn't about what he'd done. It was about who he was. "I'm going to school." Jamari shouted, his voice louder now. "Leave me alone." But the officer didn't back off. Instead, he took another step closer, his hand on his holster. His posture a signal that he wasn't backing down. "You don't want to do this," Jamari said, his voice hoarse, but the officer wasn't listening. His hand was now on Jamari's collar, shoving him back into the parking lot, forcing him to the ground. This wasn't supposed to happen. As Jamari struggled to break free, he realized just how helpless he felt. He wasn't being heard. No matter how much he tried to fight for himself, all the world saw was a black teenager, and that was enough to condemn him in the eyes of the officer. The humiliation was suffocating. Then, in the midst of the struggle, Jamari's mind flashed to something he'd heard in passing. "You can't win this fight by fighting back." His father had said it, his friends had said it, and now it hit him with the weight of a brick, but he couldn't just lie down. He couldn't. "I'm not your criminal," Jamari yelled, pushing himself up from the ground. His legs shaky but determined. The officer's hand tightened around Jamari's wrist, his fingers digging into his skin like iron. The taste of salt from Jamari's sweat mixed with the metallic tang of fear in the air. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat more frantic than the last as he tried to break free. He wasn't going to be humiliated like this. Not in front of everyone. "Let go of me," Jamari shouted, his voice hoarse, but the officer didn't listen. The crowd around them was growing, a mix of onlookers whispering in hushed tones, but no one dared to step forward. Jamari's pulse surged with anger. This was wrong. This was all wrong. The officer shoved him harder against the patrol car, forcing him to the ground with more force than Jamari had ever felt before. The pavement scraped against his cheek as he fought to get back up. He could hear the officer's heavy breath and the cruel satisfaction in his voice. "You think you're special." The officer spat. "You think you're above the law, kid? You're just another statistic waiting to happen." Jamari's mind raced. He wanted to scream, to fight back. He had every right to, didn't he? Why was this happening? Why him? His mind raced with all the times he had heard about people just like him being targeted, judged by their skin, not their actions. He could feel it now, deep in his bones. It wasn't about him walking down the street. It wasn't about what he'd done. It was about who he was. He struggled, using all his strength to pull away, his chest tight with panic. He knew the odds weren't in his favor. He had no voice, no power, nothing but his skin and his anger, and then something inside him snapped. Jamari's eyes locked onto the officers. And in that instant, he made a decision, a choice that would change everything. With every ounce of strength he had left, he shoved back, not caring about the consequences anymore. He wasn't going to lie down. He wasn't going to let this man, or anyone, take away his dignity. "I'm not your criminal," Jamari yelled, pushing himself up from the ground, his legs shaky but determined. The officer, stunned by the sudden resistance, staggered back. Jamari took the opportunity to stand tall, his fists clenched. His breath came in short bursts, his chest heaving with adrenaline. The crowd that had once remained silent began murmuring, and Jamari could feel the energy shift. Something was happening, something bigger than this moment, bigger than just him. Let him go. Someone shouted from the crowd. Jamari didn't know who it was, but he could feel the weight of their words. It was happening. The officer hesitated, looking around, and for the briefest moment, Jamari saw something flicker in his eyes. Was it doubt? Fear? Maybe, just maybe, the officer realized that Jamari wasn't the one who was out of place here. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see the truth. But the officer didn't back down. Instead, he pulled out his radio, his voice shaky as he called for backup. Jamari could feel the weight of his decision. He had just drawn the line in the sand, and there was no going back. The officer's words were still in the air, but Jamari refused to let them define him anymore. He wasn't just a victim. He was fighting back. The days following the confrontation were a blur for Jamari. The video from the lawyer had gone viral within hours, and the public outcry was immediate. News stations played the footage over and over, capturing the moment the officer had crossed the line and the teenager who dared to fight back. People rallied behind him, not just as a victim of racial profiling, but as a symbol of defiance, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning, but the battle was far from over. The officer, now under internal investigation, faced serious consequences. His actions were condemned by his department, and though his punishment wasn't immediate, the pressure from the public and the media was undeniable. A few days later, the officer was put on administrative leave, pending an official inquiry. For the first time in his career, he faced the kind of scrutiny he had never expected. His reputation, once built on power and control, crumbled before the weight of the truth. His superiors were forced to publicly address the systemic issues within their ranks. While this was a step forward, it felt like a small victory in a much larger, ongoing war. As for Jamari, things changed quickly. He had become a local hero, a voice for those who had been silenced for far too long. But fame brought its own challenges. The community that had supported him, standing in solidarity, was now demanding answers. The local school board reached out, offering him a scholarship to a pre-law program, and several civil rights organizations sent representatives to meet with him, but Jamari didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. He spent nights lying awake, thinking about what had happened to him and how many others had been through the same, or worse. His fight wasn't over, and he knew that. He realized that what had started as a personal struggle had blossomed into something bigger than him. He had become a part of a movement, a force for change, but it was a change that would take more than just one person's story. Jamari knew the truth. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about a system that allowed racism to fester unchecked, a system that conditioned people to expect less from certain groups of people, based solely on the color of their skin. Every victory, no matter how small, needed to be part of a larger shift, a movement that demanded change at every level, and yet, as the weeks passed, there was a quiet reflection that Jamari couldn't ignore. He had been given an opportunity to speak out, to confront injustice in the most public of ways. But in his heart, he understood that the fight was far from over. This was just the beginning. Jamari joined protests, spoke at rallies, and shared his story on national platforms. His words were raw, unfiltered, and full of conviction. He knew the battles ahead wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't just be about confronting individuals like the officer. It would be about dismantling the systems of power that allowed discrimination to thrive. In the months that followed, Jamari helped lead a youth mentorship program. working with others who had faced similar struggles. He guided them through the difficult process of navigating a world where the color of their skin often determined their future. He saw himself in each of them, the quiet frustration, the hidden rage, the dreams that were at risk of being crushed by the weight of bias. As for the officer, while his career in law enforcement may have been over, the conversation about racial bias in policing continued to spark debates across the nation. In a strange twist of fate, Jamari's bravery had sparked a chain of events that had exposed deeper issues, both in the community and within the police force. The officer's actions were a reminder that the fight for equality wasn't just about individual justice, but about systemic change that had to be felt everywhere. And yet, there was something more powerful that Jamari realized. Over time, the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity could never be underestimated. Jamari's story wasn't about one confrontation, it was about the thousands of small moments that had led him here. Every word spoken, every action taken was a piece of a larger puzzle. It wasn't just about him being brave in that one moment. It was about all the moments before that where he learned to stand tall even when the world around him tried to make him feel small. The takeaway: the fight against injustice is far from over. It's ongoing, and it requires each of us to show up, to stand up, and to speak out. Whether it's in the form of a viral video or a quiet conversation in a classroom, every act of resistance counts. Every story shared moves us closer to the world we all deserve, a world where no one is judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Jamari had made his stand. He had shown the world that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit could not be broken. And though his journey was far from over, he knew that every step forward, no matter how small, was one step closer to the change he believed in.